When black people wake up and become intellectually independent enough to think for themselves, as other humans are intellectually independent enough to think for themselves, then the black man will think like a black man, and he will feel for other black people. And this new thinking and feeling will cause black people to stick together.
Truth seekers, please understand, Mental Dialogue is much more than just a talk show. Each and every Saturday, we communicate with you for two reasons: to dialogue and connect. On the dialogue side, we cater to you intellectual outcasts who feel you have no place for honest discourse on race, sex, culture, and African American business. On the connect side, we've created a community where you can connect with experts specifically in finance, whether personal or business, and mental health, whether it's trauma or to optimize performance, along with all the other skill sets from other MD community members. Our mission was to create a virtual nationwide neighborhood where African Americans learn to trade ideas, goods, and services through social media, meetup, and this podcast. To become a neighbor of the Mental Dialogue Community Club, please visit us at mentaldialogue.com. We are better with you than we are without you. We can be neighbors even though we don't live next to each other. Hashtag raise the culture.
Oh, I've been talking to the trees with the intro, didn't realize I was muted. I done gave you a renowned introduction and everything.
And I heard nothing.
Nah, good stuff. Let me start that over. So, y'all, thank y'all. It's your boy, Montoya Smith. I am your mental activist and the curator of the Mental Dialogue Perspective. It is a pop-up show. We have done maybe one of these this year. My queen of intellect, Latrice, is rocking in this thing with me. She's been holding me down for years on the audio show. And so I've said from time to time I will pop up and do a video show. So, Latrice, thank you for being with me. If you will, Queen, give them a little bit of your background. We got Unc the God Killer on here with us. Hopefully that brother will be able to get on camera and audio with us as well, and we'll introduce him. But give him a little bit of your background as we jump into some various topics today. But go ahead, Queen.
Sure. I'm Latrice Ross. I've spent the last 15 years or so doing diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging work. That is a bad word these days, but it still does not stop the work that needs to be done. We call it other things. We give it other names, but the work is still being done.
Nah, thank you very much. All right, brother Unc, are you available? I see you're muted, so I'm okay. He's available. All right, you cool. Thank you, brother, for being with us. You are the reason I even got into the internet radio, if you will, way back with the Blog Talk days. Finally came over here to YouTube. So thank you for your assistance of trying to, in a sense, elevate me in this space. But if you will, anything you want to give in reference to your background today, and we're going to get into this morning's discussion question, because if you recall, on the Blog Talk days, we always do show in the form of a question. So I brought that format black today, as we like to say on Mental Dialogue. But thank you for being here.
Well, I push. I'm a science advocate, and I push for the African American community to elevate themselves to the point where they can understand basic scientific concepts. It helps them in making their political decisions, their cultural decisions, and their economic decisions. Most people don't even know that. And so most of the stuff we go through is based off a lack of education in certain subjects, and we rely on our beliefs in areas where belief is not needed, where understanding is. So that's why I always support the mental dialogue, bro.
Now, I love that, because again, today we're talking about, I would say, relatively a political and economic discussion. But to your point, science, it always has a lever in there that a lot of times we do fail to pay attention to. So I'm glad to have your perspective on this discussion today. But to get into the discussion, we asked the question we asked today is, can African Americans pull themselves up by their bootstrap? And so before I even get any opinions by y'all, I'm actually going to play a cut. We just came off we're in the wake of the Martin Luther King holiday celebration. We're at a time in our country where even that, I've seen people even question even the need to celebrate. Saw one of my friends talk about Martin Luther King's character issues. So bringing that stuff in there to say, should we even be celebrating this man, kind of came up. And so, with that said, we're gonna start with some of Dr. King's own words. Actually, let me mute you real quick, Queen. We can hear you a little bit, just so you know. Okay, yeah, we good. All right, so we'll start with some Dr. King's own words, and we'll get y'all thoughts coming back. Hopefully, can get back in this thing with us. All right, here we go. Let me play this cut from Dr. King himself talking about our ability to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. Here we go.
No other ethnic group has been a slave on American soil.
I mean, every other group that came as an immigrant somehow, not easily, but somehow got around it. Is it just the fact that Negroes are black?
America freed the slaves in 1863 through the Emancipation Proclamation of Abraham Lincoln, but gave the slaves no land or nothing in reality, and as a matter of fact, to get started on. At the same time, America was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that there was a willingness to give the white peasants from Europe an economic base. And yet it refused to give its black peasants from Africa, who came here involuntarily in chains and had worked free for 244 years, any kind of economic base. And so emancipation for the Negro was really freedom to hunger. It was freedom to the winds and rains of heaven. It was freedom without food to eat or land to cultivate, and therefore it was freedom and famine at the same time. And when white Americans tell the Negro to lift himself by his own bootstraps, they don't look over the legacy of slavery and segregation. I believe we ought to do all we can and seek to lift ourselves by our own bootstraps. But it's a cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And many Negroes, by the thousands and millions, have been left bootless as a result of all of these years of oppression and as a result of a society that deliberately made his color a stigma and something worthless and degrading.
So those are Dr. King's word himself. Latrice, as the queen of the show, we'll start with you. In a sense, your thoughts, and I'll give a little more context. Clearly, at that time, King is, in a sense, in the fight for, quote unquote, civil rights. Here in 2025, in a sense, those were achieved, but just kind of wanting to bring that context into it. But what are your thoughts about what Dr. King had to say in reference to African Americans pulling themselves up by their bootstraps?
So I'd like to start by saying he's absolutely correct, because this actually started, this whole phrase, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, started out as a myth. And it originally meant something that's impossible to achieve. Because if you visualize putting on a pair of boots and tying them up and then attempting to pull yourself up by those shoestrings, you literally can't do that. And so they've taken something that originally meant something impossible to achieve and placed it in the Black community as a means of saying that if we just apply the appropriate amount of effort, then we can overcome the things that have been placed in front of us as obstacles to achieve a certain level of success, when it's absolutely an inaccurate statement.
Hey, all right, I respect that. Your thoughts on what Dr. King had to say, or what Latrice had to say?
Well, when you have systemic racism, meaning the rules and regulations are set up to put one group of people behind the 8 ball right off the jump, there's no such thing as pull yourself up by the bootstrings. We were part of the largest forced migration on planet Earth. And, I'm not one to make excuses. I advocate for us teaching our correct history. We don't need nobody to help with that. We don't need you. I never think that our history is, quote unquote, being hid from us. I know that's a means to trick us, right? But as far as economic stability, that's what they took from us. They took our economic. That's the foundation of how humans function on planet Earth, is through their economics, their food, their clothing, their shelter, and they effectively put a cap on that by putting in Jim Crow rules. We had to fight for our civil rights. And so there's never a such thing as pull yourself up by your bootstrings. Now, some of us may be able to do that. Okay. But that's not, generally speaking, right? And we had these conversations that just because you are doing well, the majority of people may not be that. Everybody don't have that. So when you're talking about a population of people that are marginalized, there is no such thing as pull yourself up by the bootstrings. That, like the sister said, that's a wild myth. I'm gonna add the wild part to it. It's wild.
Okay. I can dig it. Here's the context. When I would say context, here's what I'll add to that. So I think people should clearly understand that individually you can. I just want to put that perspective out there, right? I think the reason I say that is because the dialogue, in my opinion, often jumps between, and I'm not saying people are, in my opinion, that they're conscious of this conversation. The dialogue is we try to have a collective conversation about us as African Americans collectively, right? And it's kind of what you said. You said some of us. Well, I'll say for anybody out there watching, you individually, even if you, in a sense, don't have a boot, so your first step maybe have to get yourself a boot. And if you get yourself a boot, then I'm going to say to you individually, anybody watching, individually, you can pull yourself up by your bootstrap. I'm just going to say on an individual level, that's any of us to a degree. That's what I would offer. I'm saying that to make sure we separate this conversation to not be based on your personal relative experience when you start putting it up to what Aunt said, a collective systematic approach to what was done culturally. So as we have this dialogue, the context that I'm trying to set, so while I pretty much agree with Latrice, I agree with you, Brother Unc, from my perspective. I mean, I agree with what y'all are saying. I'm just saying for anybody watching, the dialogue should not be thinking of what did I do when we're having, in a sense, a collective conversation. Latrice, does that help with some of the context of where I think we're going for the rest of this show? Or do you even disagree with anything that I'm saying?
I don't necessarily disagree, because the whole concept of pulling yourself up by the bootstrap is the foundation is mired in rugged individualism. And so in a sense, it's trying to take us away from the collective and focus on the individual. And even those who are able to pull themselves up by the bootstrap, there are still factors in play that make it much more difficult than those who are not melanated people. They have slower access to capital, higher interest rates, and lower approval odds, less promotional opportunities in the workplace. In the workplace, you have less margin for error. So there are still obstacles as you pull yourself up by the proverbial bootstrap that you have to overcome.
Yep. And the last thing is, in this conversation, I don't want to even, and I'll say, I don't know if this is actually a word, but I don't want to mythologize the concept that this conversation is a conversation about all of us doing well. Like, that is not a reality for any group. There are people on the high end, there are people on the low end of all ethnicities, all races. And so we're not having, just one last context. We're going to play some more videos. We're not having a conversation saying, hey, everybody can and should be successful. That's a simple conversation, nor is it the aim. I think sometimes that is the thought process when we're having these conversations. And so when we look at those who are still struggling for whatever reasons or whatever they're going through, whether that be individual choices or systemic issues, I always say this from a psychological standpoint, it is natural for any group. All groups do this. This is not just an African-American thing. Because you are familiar with your own, you know the good and bad of your own group. And so you will look often at the bad of those in your group that you feel like are not doing what they should do individually, or even if you know they've been harmed systemically, you will kind of look at that and say, oh man, we're not doing well. And again, I'm just talking about the psychology of how these conversations happen without that context. Latrice, I saw you shaking your head. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I want to, and I agree with what you're saying, but there's also a caveat to that the bootstrap narrative is often used to deny responsibility politically and culturally,
yes.
And to avoid investment in our community, avoid investing in education, in healthcare, in housing, in infrastructure. And then that allows them to then blame marginalized communities for the outcomes that have actually been shaped by the policies that they put in place.
No, good stuff. I got Brother Pianki says people need to study those who achieve success to gain bits and pieces they've used to achieve that success. Absolutely agree with that, Brother Pianki. Let me get to another cut as we continue through this conversation. All right, and I'll let Brother Unc react to this one first, as I let Latrice react to the last one first.
I am going to be surrounded by the smartest people from wherever they from. This is like the cream of the crop. Mm-hmm. And I got there and I was like,
I want to hit my dad up. Now, here's a man who I done vilified on a grand scale. I put all this shit in the street and used him, juiced my dad is like, this is the reason I'm fucking foul out here. You know, I'm come from this wayward upbringing and, you know, my dad is the reason I'm such a fuck.
I am going to be surrounded by the smartest people from wherever they from. This is like the cream of the crop.
Mm-hmm.
And I got there and I was like,
this it?
I know you lying. I'm looking around in these classrooms and I'm like, you're not, I mean, it's not a whole bunch of us. It's not a whole bunch of black folks, obviously. So this comment isn't even really about us. It's really about the white majority. I was like, you're not smart. You're white. You had tutors your whole life. You had your parents investing thousands of dollars into your LSAT prep class. And they basically strong-armed and shoehorned you in to this group of people. But I know so many Negroes in Savannah, Georgia, who ain't never left the city limits of Savannah from Yamacraw Village, who's smarter than you, but they ain't never had nobody paying for their education.
Mm-hmm.
They ain't never been to nobody private school. They ain't never been to nobody Kaplan class. So they're not here at Harvard. But y'all are. And it would be these same people that I'm like, bro, you mediocre as hell. Your parents just have money. And then you got the nerve to turn around and be talking about meritocracy. Are you serious? You're stupid. Bruh. So I just got really, really pissed. Like when I tell you next level, my blood pressure high while I was in law school, because I was like, these people are dumb. And then they about to come out and run the world.
Brother, your thoughts as that sister just kind of breaks down her, it's a relative experience, her personal experience, but having gone to not Ivy League school, but I'll say next level school, I used to run into the same thing. I remember being at the U.S. Air Force Academy and having all these dialogues about affirmative action at the time, and people questioning whether I should be there based on my quote unquote qualifications. And I would always say, man, who's the dumbest person in this class? And it would always be some kid that got in because their dad went to the school and they got in. Like that's who we was helping the most. You wasn't helping me the most. We helping the kid that's just here because his dad was a general. But go ahead, brother. I'm sorry.
So, you know, I advocate for education. Like I initially homeschooled my children. Okay, well, my wife did, not me. All right. And the thing that I ran across when they wanted to go to school was, you know, my daughter was always felt like she was gifted. Now she had the building block, okay, but her test scores they was good, but they wasn't where the school system claimed that gifted should be. But she would outclass everybody that was claimed to be gifted, and so it was a mortal combat with my daughter. Every step she went, we was like, wait a minute, yo, she doing better than our grades better than all them. They her friends, right? I said, I don't understand that. I say, so is it a real rule? Well, you know, we just don't want to struggle. I said, she's never struggling. You know what I'm saying? I said, she's never struggling. And I had to fight all the way to high school. So they got the test scores and the grade. Like, it's a wild system there. And if you don't stand up and advocate for your daggone kids, man, they put them anywhere. I got one more story. So, you know, I at times I get a chance to lecture, big up to Dr. Oyamayat, Morgan State University, Southern University, chance to, you know, give a lecture on the African origins of STEM, right? And there's stories I hear where certain programs will pick through Morgan State University's students, right? And they'll go to these next level colleges. I'm not gonna mention that, right? But you get there and the professor looking at you like, is you gonna be able to handle this? Do y'all got some questions? And when the students don't have no questions because they already know all the stuff, because like Dr. Miata is top notch, they already know all the stuff. They thinking that you don't understand, and the person got to advocate for it. Oh, I understand. You have not said anything that even made me want the question. See, the same. Listen, man.
We know this already. This was a waste of time.
Listen, man. Listen. I think it's just the way humans get down, bro. If you just in that, and it's a power struggle between the haves and the have-nots, and and the visual, like there's a visual thing going on where white is known to be a superior and black is known to be ignorant, right? That's why I advocate for science, and it's our biases. You know, we talk about this all the time. There's a lot of biases going in these universities, bro. Just like that sister said, man. Like, and if you don't advocate for yourself, right? If you don't advocate for your children, bro, they're gonna always get ran over by that system that says that the white is right and the black is dumb and ignorant. Like, we carry racism right now and don't even know. Like, you know that conversation we had. I'm gonna cut it. If you advocating for like an ancient civilization to be black, yo, you racism right there. Because they put that colonized idea in your head. They racialized it. With the category of black was here, the category of white was here. They made themselves at the top. So I always advocate for yourself. You know, fight for your colonialism because it's there, right? And yeah, that was a serious clip right there, though, bro, because that's real.
Go ahead, Latrice, your thoughts.
Sure. So when she mentioned meritocracy, the first thing that came to my mind, in my last role and in roles before, they have, companies have internship programs. Most of those internship programs are filled with executives' kids. And so what that does, that removes the space for one of a black child or a Latino child or someone who comes from an underprivileged background, because the CEO, the CFO, the CHRO, all of these C-suite executives have put their kids in these internship programs. And so then they get that edge ahead of others. And then that's when meritocracy all of a sudden kicks in. But then they've already skipped to the front of the line by having parents who are in positions of power that position them into positions of power. And so meritocracy itself, in theory, sounds great, but in practice, it's a joke.
And let's talk about this before we play the next clip. All right, let me see. I got another comment. Let me put this comment up as well. Brother P, I think this is Brother Pianki still. He says, black students leave a large number of perks and scholarship on the table because they are not prepared. Let me make sure I read it right. Prepared, i.e. qualified. African students take those scholarships that American blacks don't, is Brother Pianki's perspective. I actually think some of what he's saying is correct from the standpoint of when I was in college admissions. They're definitely throughout, but it's not just African Americans though, but there are opportunities and scholarships that go unclaimed every year, right? So that just happens kind of across the board with the amount of ability of scholarships. And sometimes it's just based on requirements. Sometimes they don't have enough people who qualify for a specific scholarship, and all the grants that are just giveaway money. All of that is not always given out every year. So I don't know if that's a product, Brother P, I don't know if that's a product particularly to us as African Americans, but I do think what he's saying happens, but I don't think it's an anomaly or I shouldn't say anomaly, something that's an ongoing thing that's not a product of all the scholarship offerings in the college. That's my perspective from having worked in college admissions. But what I will say in reference to DEI and the word meritocracy, and so it's becoming aware of politically getting rid of DEI has had real effects, since affirmative action was ended. Remember when the Asian students, for example, argued in the Ivy League schools and got rid of affirmative action. And so there's been real effects. And quite often, there are people in our community that assume that DEI was unnecessary because they made bad assumptions about what DEI was. There's a narrative associated with DEI as if unqualified people were getting in position. The reality is the clip that we just saw, that basically DEI was instructed to say, hey, this school or this, if you're a school, for example, that receives public money from the federal government, whatever scholarship money or whatever, then your university needs to be diverse. So what the top schools do and what most schools do, they're still going to fill those spots with the best students they can get. And that's absolutely what happened at Harvard. So when the numbers were, for example, were 12% African Americans getting into Harvard, I promise you, from having worked college admissions, those 12% were the top black people in the entire country. So only the top black people go. So that's why that sister can have that experience. Like she said, I'm going to Harvard thinking, well, Harvard Law School, she was in the graduate program, but this is even happening at the college. They're going thinking, we're finna be around all the smartest people in the world, not realizing that within your demographic, since they are required to have some diversity, they literally only take the best. So now without DEI, then you start getting more students, average students that are allowed because they have access and they have the finances to go. Like that's the reality of when you remove DEI was a guardrail. It did not let unqualified people in. Your thoughts on that, Latrice?
So first of all, we do have to understand that educational underfunding in our communities is a very real thing because it's tied to tax bases. So let's start with that. Secondly, they have totally flipped the script on what DEI was designed to do. DEI was designed to stop underqualified white folks from taking jobs from overqualified Black and brown folks. So let's be clear about what it was designed to do. And if we really think about this country and its history, they are never going to give us underqualified folks a thing. So it was never designed to do that. It was never practiced in that manner either. Most times when DEI came into play, someone was typically overqualified. I mean, I just take my own lived experiences into play when I've had to coach or teach people that I report into how to do my job and theirs. For instance, I had a VP ask me why it was not okay for him to keep telling about his one Black friend, or why it was not okay for him to tell me how articulate I am. These are things that if you are a VP of DEI, whether you're white, Black, whatever, you should already understand these things and why these things are not appropriate as it relates to marginalized groups. So that's my thought on that.
Nah, good stuff. I can play another cut. Or brother, uncle, if you want to say something, I can let you say something, or I can play another cut. Your thoughts, but it's up to you, brother. All right, I'm gonna go with another cut, and I'll get both of y'all responses to this cut here.
Let's discourse, shall we?
Stanford did a study where they sent out thousands of duplicate resumes to Fortune 500 companies. Half of these fake resumes had Black sounding names like Tyrell and Lamar. The other half had white sounding names like Walker and Bobby. Half of the Black applicants had a felony on their resume. Half did not. Half of the white applicants had a felony on their resume. Half did not.
About 34% of whites with no criminal record received a callback or job offer. In the case of Black testers, 14% of those with no criminal background received a callback or job offer. But the most surprising finding was really related to Blacks with no criminal background relative to whites with a felony conviction. We find that a white applicant with a felony conviction fared just as well, if not better, relative to a Black applicant with a clean record.
A white applicant with a felony conviction got callbacks at a higher rate than a Black applicant with the same resume that didn't have a felony conviction.
This suggests that being Black in America today is essentially like having a felony conviction in terms of one's chances of finding employment.
This is structural racism.
So I bring this cut up because every decade this study happens. Some group literally puts together identical applications, sends them out at different times throughout certain industries. And the results have yet to change. I don't play that. I can't imagine too many, maybe other than young people who are not familiar with this type of study gets done damn near every decade and gets reported the same way every damn decade. I don't put that up to show it to white people. I'm having conversations with us, right? And so in having the conversation with us, for anyone who suggests that you can pull up by your bootstrap, I'm saying collectively, I've already qualified if you just now started watching. I'm not talking about from an individual standpoint. Individually, we are capable. You can do whatever the hell you want to. Let me keep saying that, just so if somebody just joined in. But from a collective standpoint, when we're having these conversations, people will have the conversation as if the video you just saw by Joshua Doss is as if it's went away. as if it's not a reality. And he just said the key word, structural. And the reason I highlight and point out structural is because what happens is quite often the dialogues we have within ourselves about ourselves, we have failed for what I think is the greatest trick of the political narrative that comes to racism. Most of the dialogues we're having are being led by what we're hearing politically because of how politics on both sides of the aisle use race as a political pawn. So we start having the dialogues amongst ourselves with the narratives that are handed to us via the media. And what I always offer, Latrice, is the best trick that racism has is to hide itself. And I'm saying hide its structural self, because most of America will have an issue if there's a blatant racial issue. I'm talking about something that's blatant. If it's openly racist, most of America will identify and say, "Oh, that's racist as hell." And what people do is remove themselves and says, "Well, I would never do that very bigoted thing there. I would never do that. I'm not like that. That person is racist and they're terrible." Most of America would line up, outside of the obvious racist people, would line up and say, "Oh, that's horrible. That should not be done." But the political narratives keep us away from the structural things like the example we just saw. And we don't even know how to correctly identify structural, so that when we take political opportunities such as understanding that DEI is structural, then we can stop getting into the nuance and the narrative of whether DEI means qualified or not. That's a narrative. There's nothing factual about it, legally or nothing, but we'll have the conversation based on the narrative and not the facts. Go ahead, Latrice.
So what you're saying is that this whole bootstrap narrative actually individualizes what are collective policy design failures. And if people fail to see that, because when you talk about racism or when you talk about oppression, they immediately go to me. Well, I'm not this, or I don't do this. You may not do it individually, but if you are not actively engaged in anti-Blackness and in anti-racism, getting away with racism, not being anti-Black, if you're not actively engaged in trying to do away with those structures, then you are contributing to the problem. Because it's not about you. And I often encounter this when I do lunch and learns or when I have discussions with folks about, well, I'm not racist. And honestly, I think a lot of times when I have discussions with them, they don't realize that there are still structural things in place. They don't understand that the fact that we didn't start from the same economic starting point still has impact on us today, because wealth builds over generations. And if we didn't start with that boost up that they got with the land grab that was given away to them, and even when we think about when the government was giving away land, they allowed Black folks, Black families, Black women and children to move into subsidized housing, but they required that the dad not be there. So in the meantime, they're giving away land to white families so that they can own homes. They allow us to move into the subsidized housing that white folks moved out of, but then they proceed to break up our families, which will make it even more difficult for us in the future to continue to grow and to achieve. But what they don't understand, that individually, Black people do pull themselves up. We're building businesses, we're earning degrees, we're leading organizations, we are creating culture, we're creating wealth from nothing within our community. So we are doing this, but the structural impact is still very prevalent in our society.
Any thoughts on this, Brother Unc? What we're talking about right now, again, just recognizing that structural. I think we have trouble even amongst our own community. Like, let me go a little further into that and get your thoughts. So, like earlier when Latrice was highlighting that the internships are filled with the CEOs' children and things of that nature. So what I'm not saying, to have this conversation as accurately as possible, what I'm not saying is, I'm not saying that the CEO shouldn't fill those internships with their children. I'm not saying that they shouldn't. However, when you start talking about, I understand, okay, cool, you can say that, but I'm not, I think nepotism is so naturally human that I think it would be naive to a degree to expect a CEO not to do that. What I always highlight, in my opinion, the reality of that is the CEO ain't gonna have 1 or 2 children. So again, most people are gonna do that, where you're gonna spill up 1 or 2 slots. At the end of the day, nepotism is going to be a reality of humans. It always has been. So I don't think we should be naive to think nepotism is not going to exist. However, it's still the reality of understanding it structurally is like the example we just saw with Joshua Das when he was given that thing that at the end of the day, if you are 60% or 70% of the majority, then what's happening with those applications is like you talked about. The individual may say, well, I'm okay, I wouldn't do that. But it is narratives that are causing companies every decade to turn a rail to rail. There's a narrative associated with it. And the narrative is because you're in the majority. If you're in the majority, you're never going to be susceptible to that. So it ends up being structural because of narratives. That's just speaking the facts about it. And then one last thing I'll say, and I always like to clarify this with when they allow Black women to move into subsidized housing. The action, I just like to say it accurately. It wasn't necessarily that the man could not move in. The amount that you were allowed to make to move into the home, it could never be 2 incomes. So I'm just like I'm not trying to. I just like to say it as accurately as possible. That the amount to even be in that subsidized home would never allow for two incomes. That's why quite often when the brother man was there, he was just not reporting his income or not being there when the worker came by. Now, what happened for the majority of whites who were doing the exact same thing is they lived in rural areas, and so they knew that the social worker was coming from a mile away. Once a social worker got inside of a project building, he could get everybody in trouble just by walking up the stairs. But when the social worker showed up in the country at the white people's home that was subsidized, the one person telling everybody else, by the time the guy get there, the man's never there. Like they could catch Black people quicker just because we were living in projects, 40 stories high. The white people that were doing the same thing, more of them were on these subsidized homes than us. But getting caught was a lot harder in the rural areas. I'm just talking about the reality of how those numbers played out. Because I like to be as specific as possible. Both of y'all can give me some thoughts. I think Latrice, you had something you want to say. Go ahead, Queen.
So you said a couple, and the 2 jobs that the 2 companies that come to mind specifically, those 100, 150, 200 internship slots, outside of 2 slots typically, were all filled with executives in the company's children. So that also becomes a structural issue. Because it prevents Black folks, minority folks from marginalized groups from getting access to opportunity, and they are more than qualified. They go past the qualifications. You don't have to meet the minimum qualifications, because if an SVP or a CEO or a CFO says, hey, my kid's looking for an internship, you lowly peon, what are you going to do? You're going to give that executive's child that internship and be damned everybody else who might have a child that meets the qualifications or even exceeds the qualifications. They won't get those opportunities. And I know 10 people in my last role, those students have graduated, and they all have jobs as new hires making 120 plus annually.
No, yeah, I'm not. I just accept that nepotism is a human trait. That's all. And I'm not even disagreeing with you. And that's, so I'm not disagreeing with you. I just accept it as that's a reality of that any child of any race or any ethnicity will come up against based on where they choose to live. Brother Unc, something you want to say? We got a comment as well.
Basically, if I own the corporation, of course I'm gonna give my kids a job. That's my responsibility. Like, what are we talking about here? Like, that's my responsibility to make sure my kids are trained at what I'm doing, and they're gonna get the spots. If you don't like it, get the stepping. So I understand that. Our numbers is just 42 million to 200 million. And so that's why I always advocate for learning as much as you can learn. And some of us that got the acumen to start their own law firm, stuff like that, do that, and just continue to work with ourselves and put ourselves in that position so you can say, my son's doing this and my son's doing that. That's how you do that. You don't got some things you ain't got to fight.
And here's the context. It's not even about fighting it. The context is I think we all three understand that structural this situation is because of the numbers. So it's the reason why, from a political standpoint, we should be on the same page and understand what DEI exactly is, because it becomes a guardrail so that the nepotism cannot overrun. Because without it, it runs rampant. So that's you understand what I'm saying? So it's like I accept the nepotism for it is. So we say, okay, this is what it is. And so instead of us being down here in the weeds talking about whether we're qualified or not, we can structurally come up with basically we accept the reality for what it is and take a strategy based on that reality. And I say quite often we're arguing in the weeds and hurt ourselves and let something like DEI, which is effective guardrail, go away because we didn't even understand it from a political standpoint. That's the bigger picture I'm attempting to paint here, if that all makes sense. Go ahead, brother.
So I see somebody here, they got the NESB annual conference and how they hire a lot of blacks in STEM. So, you know, I actually have a article published in NEPSI. Am I saying it right? How did I say that right?
I think it's
NEPSI, right? It's called Proposing African-Centered Education in STEM for African American STEM learners. And so if y'all get a chance, go over there and read that. And he said, like I said, I'm an advocate of science, and that's correct. But we got to get the kids prepared for this to start to think scientifically. You know, in our community, you got your religion and you got your scientific thinking. Sometimes we overemphasize, right? We need to balance it out a little bit better so we can have access to these jobs. You got to be prepared to take the jobs where people don't think you're supposed to be. You got to be ready for it. You know, there's no such thing as luck. There's when preparation meets opportunity, right? A lot of times we miss opportunity just based off the way, you know, our home structures are. You know, I raised my kids with books all around. Didn't force them to read them, but that's all they used to seeing is just books, right? And so it led more to them, you know, putting education as a priority. So you got to figure out how you want your kids raised. You make sure they got a good balance, understanding of, you know, their spirituality, scientific literacy. Balance that out. Don't just be one way. If you do that, you're going to put us in trouble because we need to be ready for those opportunities. I just want to, you know, put that out there.
No, fair enough. Got a comment says Black Americans have picked ourselves up by our bootstraps, but when we do, there's always someone trying to take our bootstrings. And speaking of NASB, this administration chose not to go to the Black Corps of Engineers convention to make sure they were hiring the best engineers in the country. Like that literally happened based on things that are happening politically right now. They chose not to attend the convention to where they could actually get more engineers to go into the military. Like this administration chose not to attend that. That's what happens when you misunderstand politically what's happening to you. Let me go to this. Matter of fact, let me go to this next cut. Keep this thing moving. Y'all keep y'all comments coming along, man. I'll keep trying to get it. I won't get all of them in there, but I'll get as many as I can.
Winners of rigged games never admit to themselves that they won because the game was rigged. We all sit around, we throw a Monopoly board here in front of us, and we're all sitting here together. And the researcher says, TK, you are going to start with double the money. You're going to roll first. And each time it comes to you, you're going to roll twice. And everything else will just be like a normal game of Monopoly. Now, who's going to win that game of Monopoly?
Almost certainly TK.
Almost certainly. Yeah. He is going to win that game. All right. We start playing the game. Almost immediately, he pulls ahead. He started with twice the money. He rolls 2 times every time you roll. He pulls ahead. Do you know what he starts to do? The winner of the rigged game begins to eat more snacks, begins to talk shit. And at the end, when everyone is polled about why he won, we will all say he won because he had built-in advantages in the game. He rolled twice, he started with more money, etc. And he will say that he won because of his strategy. He will say that he outplayed us. This is human nature. It's been studied. Winners of rigged games never admit to themselves that they won because the game was rigged.
That's a human thing. It's a human nature thing. That's why BS meritocracy is received the way that it is. I'll give you a real life example at the United States Air Force Academy. We had our first Black brigadier general ever at the history of the school during the time that I was there. After about a year and a half, we got called in for these military meetings by class, by freshman class, then by sophomores, then by juniors or whatever. The dialogue was about the rampant reverse discrimination that was happening in the selection of people in their positions. I went to a military college, so the way the college is set up was just like the military is in the military. All our positions were like the same way, and so people would be in leadership positions because we're eventually going to be officers in the military. So we literally are having this conversation because they were doing surveys about the amount of reverse discrimination that were happening in the positions that were gotten in the college. And the Brigadier General brings us together, and this is highlighted because we got a black Brigadier General. Now I will say some of the guys that some of the students were doing, some of the brothers and sisters were doing better than maybe as far as getting a lot of those positions. Like it was happening, we're getting some of the actual positions and stuff like that. And so there was this idea of reverse discrimination. And the general basically brought us in by an entire class and says, I'm trying to understand these surveys of this high level of reverse discrimination. And he said, outside of the top 3 positions at the school, y'all pick all the positions. Like he had to say that back to us as the student. I'm talking about the entire body of the college to say, I'm not involved. The survey was suggesting we have a black brigadier general. So the students had this concept that reverse discrimination was happening because we have this black brigadier general. And basically what happens is when they send a staff up, it has to be approved by the general. There was an assumption because there were more African Americans and more women getting in on the staff. There was an assumption that he was rejecting the selections. He basically had to tell everybody, I haven't rejected one staff you sent me to. Outside of the top 3 positions of the school, I'm not involved in none of the picking. But the assumption was, because we had a black engineer, a black brigadier general over the entire school, the assumption by the majority was these staffs look this way because he's influencing them. It was made up, completely made up. I hope I made that story make sense.
But yeah, I completely understand you.
Yeah, and so I'm relating it to that cut that we just played. It is human nature. That's where nepotism comes in. It is human nature to think this way. So I'm not making it okay, but I am highlighting it for the understanding of why DI got shot down on a false narrative. And you had people like Candace Owens and Charlie Kirk saying, I hope the black pilot is qualified when they fly this plane, just because the CEO, I think it was American Airlines, forgive me if it's the wrong one, said he wanted to ensure that he pushed the opportunity for more blacks and more women to become pilots because there's a pilot shortage.
Right.
People actually thought he was going to let unqualified people in. Like that's how ignorant this narrative was. There's every pilot that ever flies has to pass the FAA regardless. But that people were saying dumb shit like that based on a narrative.
Because
I hope I'm making all of this make sense. Go ahead, brother.
The underlying belief is a stereotype that black people are not cognitively capable of doing those roles, when the truth is that black folks have tremendous amount of efficacy. We have a tremendous amount of intellect. But what's happening is that we have to operate inside of the structural constraints that exist. And that's the part that they don't want to own up to, that they somehow mentally can't own up to, that these structural roadblocks still exist and actually prevent us from achieving the level of success on their level. Because in order for us to progress at the level that they are, we need the individual excellence that many of us are already exhibiting, the discipline that many of us are already exhibiting, along with the structural reform, the access to capital, the policy shifts, and the institutional accountability in order for that change to occur, for us to pull ourselves up by the proverbial bootstraps to the length, to the depth that they do.
Yeah, and the cut just explained why humans won't see it the way it's a natural thing to do. You've given the advantage, but you will actually believe it's your own doing. And our ego does that to protect us. That's why it does that. Brother Unc, any thought? Latrice, just so you know, you're froze on camera. We hear you clearly.
Yeah, you've been froze for a while.
You're back. You're back. All right,
Okay.
go ahead. Yep, go ahead.
So I never, we talked about this earlier. I figured that everybody knew if they let African Americans in, they would have to be just on a game. Like nobody giving us nothing. You should nobody even they scamming at this point. Yeah, you just outright scamming, you hating. Like stop it. Right? This is how America is set up. You got to be twice as better. Okay, that's part of the deal. And scientific racism put an idea in our head, right? One of the ideas was that if you're the Negro, you're the most ignorant. Okay, based off of running into certain societies that may have still been in the Stone Age. If you made it to West Africa, they was it was in the Iron Age. Okay, colonial powers had started to circumnavigate the globe. And not till Charles Darwin came in and said, whoa, wait a minute, because he had the same thought process until he started meeting these other indigenous peoples as he circumnavigated the globe. He was like, oh, shoot, I thought European culture was the best culture for everybody. Then he realized, he say, well, hell, if I just told them my language, they was up to speed just like that. It actually had nothing to do with the way they looked in their skin color. That they could do anything that we want to do. Now what we understand is if you was to go back in the time and go get yourself an ancient Egyptian and teach him how to work on an aircraft carrier, he could work on an aircraft carrier because all humans fundamentally range in intelligence and it's not based off his skin color. But that racist lie we have brought into it too. We think schooling is for white people. Being intelligent, wearing glasses make you smarter. Like the craziest thing ever. We feed into that too. Like the tough guy get the woman and the one with the glasses reading the book. He got to get the second fiddle. So it's we play a little role in that racism too. Like the black people's the most spiritual, and you ain't got no black people that don't believe. That's another point. It's all relevant. And I'm saying we run the gamut. We're just as intelligent. Africa got the most intelligent people on planet Earth and got the most stupidest people on planet Earth. Got the tallest people, got the shortest people, got the blackest people, and got the lightest people because we have the most diverse genes. It's about the genes. There's no direct line where you can a bird, you can say, oh, that's white. No, that's not how it works. So it's a lot to deal with, bro. Like the whole thing. That's why I always advocate for science and science literacy so you can even comprehend the conversation. And Montoya and Latrice, I know sometimes you're talking to people and y'all will read something, y'all will comprehend it totally different.
No, that's real. And so let me go here real quick before I play these last two cuts. Again, if the question is today is, can African Americans pull themselves up by their bootstrap? Here's a couple myths that I love to kind of bust open. Let's talk about some of the numbers real quick. So I'm gonna ask y'all a question. Latrice, I think you've heard me ask this question before. The numbers changed a little bit since the last time I asked it. If you ever heard me ask this question before, but if y'all could give me a guess on this. If all African Americans left the country right now, if all of us left the country and, let's say we go back to Ghana, all of us, right? All 43 million of us leave. How much household wealth would leave America? Percentage-wise, just give me a guess, both of you.
Household wealth, what you mean?
So basically, not with the money the government has. So the government, has the money they get from us, the taxpayer dollars. So but just separate that money because tax money technically goes for the common good of the country. That's what tax money is. Okay. That's why any government, regardless of form, technically is taking taxes. It's supposed to be for the good of the country, right? So that's basically taxes are your common good to the country. So separate tax money and say the money that we have, not the money that corporations have, but the money we have, assets and money that we have in American household. I'll tell you, just make it real clear, that number totals out right now to $138 trillion. That's what Americans individually, as families, that's what we hold in our coffers outside of the government money and outside of the corporation money.
How much trillion?
38 trillion.
So I'm thinking about
what percentage, if all African Americans left the country, what percentage of that 138?
Less than 2%, I think less than 2%, about 2% of that.
Okay, what you think, Latrice?
I'm gonna say about 4%.
Okay, so The number is 5% because we had a 60% increase from 2019 to 2022.
Oh, I missed that increase.
Yeah. And I just found out about it myself.
Mm-hmm. Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Still can't hear you.
Unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. I not hit my mic by accident. All right, but anyway, the reason I always put that number in context is because can African Americans pull themselves up by their bootstrap? I want to highlight that quite often, and not only the stuff that we have the stuff mixed up that we've been talking about, but we also don't conceptualize how much actual wealth we actually have, because we're quite often told our numbers in the context of just us, and it sounds like a lot of money. I could have told you that altogether, collectively, we have $8 trillion collectively.
Mm-hmm.
And that number sounds like, golly, what do we have? But if you remove all of us from the country, that number comes out to 5%. The reason that number matters is because quite often we have this romanticized concept of what we're capable of doing strictly on our own, even within this country, because we romanticize the Rosewoods, we romanticize the Winston-Salems, we romanticize the Black Wall Streets. They are a reality, but people rarely put into context that those Black enclaves represented about 2 to 3% max of the African Americans during those times. And so if you're not aware of that, that was a very small percentage of African Americans who were enjoying, in a sense, running their areas. If you don't realize that's just the minimum, then we say stuff in 2025 like, look what we had when we were on our own. Because we hear about those extreme, great examples that we now have learned the history of how many of them were destroyed intentionally by white America. While there were many of them, it still represented about 3% of African Americans who were enjoying that. Here's another piece of context that I want to add to this conversation. Again, the big picture is, can we pull ourselves up by our bootstrap? I do want to preface before I finish what I'm saying, I am not saying that we cannot. However, I do want to challenge the methodologies that we come up with to do it. So what people don't know quite often, those enclaves quite often a lot of them were started during the Reconstruction period. It is the 12-year period in this country in which we were left the hell alone, partly due to the military being posted up in the South to ensure those brothers in Winston-Salem would not bother. Ensuring those people, like the military's propped up in the South during that time. Frederick Douglass, when Abraham Lincoln's asked, what should we do for the Negro if in fact we win this war and we end slavery? And Frederick Douglass' answer was nothing. When we were left alone, there were enclaves, and those illiterate African Americans sent 6 people to the Senate, the highest. In a short period of time, they were sending people to the highest offices in the land. Why does that matter? Because they use the same system that we now quite often, out of disdain, they use the exact same system to reach the highest height and control their area. Meaning, being involved in the politics and governance of yourself is how you control your area. We actually, in my opinion, when we have these collective conversations, we actually try to separate from one of the actual solutions, which is being involved politically and structurally in what you do. I don't want to overstate politics. However, I think we understate it and do not realize that those enclaves governed themselves, selected their solutions, selected their positions, and sent people into governance and had their own mayors. So they used the very system that we disavow to empower themselves. And I think sometimes we miss the boat and think that at 2025, there is a concept to separate from the system and not realizing that other ethnic groups that we highlight and say, look at how this group does, the Asians, or look how the Jewish does. No, they're actually involved in commerce in this system just like everybody else. They're not separating their dollar the way that we assume. Like we get told myths like circulating your dollar. It's an ineffective economic thought that is not what other groups are doing. What they do come to the diverse capital system of ours, and they go out and extract as much as they can from others and bring that money home. They don't circulate their dollar, because I've said this on Unc's show before. If he and I circulate a dollar, we're not making any money. We're just passing a dollar back and forth. So I know I went on a kind of a big thing, but it's just like I want to challenge, how do we come up with effective solutions based on what our ancestors have gotten us to pull ourselves up while the system is doing what it's doing. I'm not saying that we cannot, but we cannot keep relying on the myth of bootstrap, rugged individualism methodology, as Latrice said at the beginning of this, determined to have us get involved in these conversations about what you and I personally are not doing for the collective, when it's not a solution for how to collectively move. I'll shut up and let Latrice jump in.
So in my book, in the last part of my book, Falling Black in Love Again, I actually created a framework called the 4 sacred spaces when we recreate our village. And the sacred spaces are learning, economics, restorative and healing, and governance. And when we look at things through that, through those 4 issues, we find that presently we are living a sort of a distorted perspective. And the way that I discuss it in my book is how we can actually take that distortion and make it and adjust it so that we can actually achieve success outside of the whole bootstrap theory. Because presently what that does, it simply rewards compliance, and it takes away from the collective and the things that we do, and it trains the eye on the individualism, and it narrows our imagination and our trust. And so because of how we came to this country, because of how we've been allowed to exist in this country, we cannot. We definitely have to do our own individual things, but we can't move away from the collective if we're going to succeed. Even individually, we're able to better achieve if we understand collectively those things that we need to do to move us forward as a community of folks. And I think a lot of times, because we want that proximity to power, we will move away from the collective and align ourselves with that bootstrap theory so that we can get what we need.
Yeah, go ahead, brother. Please go ahead.
So I hear the sister Latrice, and big up to Dr. Oyamayat that's in the chat.
Thank you, Queen, for watching.
Yeah, serious individual. Big up to conscious ingenuity. So I hear you on a regular talking about collectiveness and how the individual practices aren't really beneficial to us.
Not what I said.
But see, Ned, there's a monkey wrench in the whole program. And so your social.
Hold on one second. I think she wanted to give some clarity on what she wants. She wants to make sure you understand what she said. Then you can make the way you're responding to exactly what she said.
I'm not negating or taking away what we do individually, because
I know. I didn't take it that way. I'm taking.
Just let her just clarify, and then you can still jump in. Even if you understood it, just let her clarify.
Okay.
She thinks you didn't understand her, whether you may have, but let her finish. Yeah.
We absolutely must show up individually. We have a responsibility to show up and do our thing individually, to be educated, to have discipline, to have a solid work ethic. But what I am saying is that rugged individualism does not help us as a community. That's all I'm saying. But I do it myself every single day. I have 4 different business initiatives that I'm working on right now. So I absolutely believe that individually we have a responsibility to show up and show out every day.
So she added that clarity. So, brother, is there anything you want to say to her? She just wanted to make sure you understood exactly what she was saying.
I mean, she was crystal clear. She didn't have to remake that out.
She was just making sure.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you did a great job, sis. You didn't have to reorganize. That was perfect. I completely understand what you're saying. I wanted to introduce a monkey wrench into that program, though. Here's the monkey wrench. It's a social cultural system that causes you to think individually. I mean, across what you're talking about,
right?
Okay? So humans are formed through cultural, social cultural, social systems.
Right.
The way you do things, your worldview is shaped and formulated. So if you would take it back to Africa, we had social cultural systems that formed our ideas based off of the collective. So if it was something wrong with the village, right, it wasn't just the individual that had to fix it. Everybody collectively had to come and fix it. Right. But you got to understand, we went through a system called oppression and slavery that, watch this, that said the individual is born into sin. See, so if the individual is born into sin, then the individual has to change that. So I ain't got nothing to do with you being born into sin. I'm accepting such and such and such, and I'm good. See how we lost collectiveness based off our social cultural system, and on purpose, I didn't mention certain things. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Oh, and I absolutely agree with you. And a large part of my book actually talks about that. How, with my book, it's about healing and restoration, but it goes back to the history of how we got here, how we got to this space where we're so broken, and what we need to do to heal that brokenness.
Yeah, you're right though. Collectively, we have to figure out a way, but we have, our worldview has become very narrow and very individual.
Right. And I think we're all in agreement. And then what I would say, the how to figure out the way, what I think Latrice is saying, and I'm also offering a little bit, is why I do the Politically Conscious show, is to challenge our community not to be disconnected to governance. That's why I gave the history of how
that's important.
How our enclaves that we brag about in 2025. Because if you think about the actual history, to your point, like I say, we don't get into the hidden stuff, but we know publicly, we didn't know about Black Wall Street till about 20 years ago, because there was an effort to not know about it. And then so on our own, through our own Black minds and efforts to dig up history, that's how we know about Winston-Salem and the one coup that was actually pulled in this country to remove, support of African Americans. It was a mixed culture, but they did the coup because the white supremacists were concerned about Winston-Salem being too mixed culture. I'm just giving these small examples.
Can I ask?
Okay, go ahead.
So voting is a collective act. So when people holler about don't vote, wait a minute, dude, you feeding into it, because that's the time for us to collectively get together on some ideas that we may or may not agree, but we do it for the greater whole. So when I hear individuals say don't vote, it's the most wildest individual thing I've ever heard in my life. And people that promote that nonsense is out of order.
And that's a good point to this conversation when we say, how can we pull ourselves up, or can African Americans pull themselves up? What happens is, I understand the disdain for voting and how it, in a sense, people will say, well, it looks like we didn't get anything. And I get where that sentiment comes through. I went through a little period of that when I was young, believe it or not, right? I went through a period. Now, I still kept voting. I was a military member, so I kept voting, but I understood the concept. But the reason I understand the concept is because I'm aware of the narrative that they're getting and receiving for how they get to that point. They're just unaware of what they actually get from, in a sense, the power of voting. And then there's also, on the other end of it, those who are extreme and say stuff like, your ancestors died for your right to vote. The extreme of that is leave it as though as just voting is enough. So they get frustrated with the people who push voting to the extent that it's an extreme, and they feel like, well, what's voting getting me? And you make voting this thing that because your ancestors died, you have to do it. So all I'm only highlighting is, I get the extremes of the narratives, but you're absolutely right, that you can become more informed and more aware of. For example, there was just a special vote just 3 months ago that we let people know about on Politically Conscious in our county that made sure our heating and air didn't go up. Like, it was a special election. It wasn't even a regular vote. It's just because of how it failed. I don't understand why it was end up being. I don't remember the exact why. My little experts could explain it to me. But I'm just saying, little small things like that, like, hell, that make a difference. As expensive as this stuff is now, I don't want my heating and air to go up. Like I'm saying, people, because people don't think of voting locally. But I'm telling you that the enclaves that we brag about, if you go dig up their history, they were actually using this very system to put people in power to ensure collective good. That's how those enclaves that we brag about even came about. And there's one other number I want to say before I play these last two clips. I see brother Pianki saying, hey, It's 30 million in the workforce, earning 37 median income. That equates to $1.1 trillion. Again, I like to put numbers in context. You see the consumer index number saying African Americans spend about it's like up to 1.3, 1.4 trillion. What you will see, here's a narrative trick that is used to make us have individual conversations. So, for example, you'll see people, very brilliant people, say, "Hey, African Americans have a 1.3 trillion dollar spending power," and you'll see somebody go, "Yeah, that would be 9th or 10th in GDP compared to other countries." Like people, I'm not saying that the people that are doing it are even intentionally aware of what I'm about to say. I'm not downing the individual. I am trying to weed through the narratives and put it in context so that we don't come up with BS solutions for how we can actually win. So a BS solution is highlighting the 1.3 trillion and saying that it would be the 10th largest amount of GDP. GDP is a production number. It's what the countries produce. 1.3 trillion consumer spending number is basically what do you spend into the economy. It has nothing to do with the number I just spoke about a few minutes ago, the actual assets and wealth that you have. It is a consumer number. 70% of that number goes to necessities for all groups. We spend 1.3 trillion, Hispanics spend 1.4 trillion, Asians spend about, I think it's 0.6, and white America spends 11. 5 times my number. That equates to your population number. But if you get told that number, you get told the number and believe that we're ignorant or that we are, here it is, the number they always say. If you believe that we're the biggest spenders and somebody tells you we have $1.3 trillion that we're spending every year, you actually go feed into the narrative that we're ignorant and we overspend our money, not realizing that number is just keeping up with how much every group spends. That's all the number does. It's done out of University of Georgia every year. That's where the number comes from. It's a number used for marketing. But if you don't know that, you think black people are throwing away their $1.3 trillion.
Giving it away.
No, not happening. And there's studies that even shows, there's even I think it's a Walden study that did these studies on different groups, and your discretionary income is usually typically minimum if you're poor, if you will, but there is a phenomenon amongst the poor of keeping up with the Joneses that doesn't seem to exist at middle class and upper class. But even that keeping up with the Jones number, the discretionary difference is like 3 to 10%, where 3% or 10% of your income is keeping up with the Joneses. Like and check it out. You know what it happens the most? Not in the poor neighborhood. It's when, this is according to the study, it happens when the poor person is placed in another neighborhood to comparing themselves to those they live with. So
you got some comments in the chat.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Let me look at them.
So explain, Dr. May, I say we don't gross $1 trillion.
Yeah, I'm gonna say, we're basically saying the same thing. I think it's just saying, it's just because it's just, for example, if I get, I'll just make it real simple example. So whatever money.
What was the question you asked? It was a question you asked about how much.
I was just explaining how people.
You said if we was to leave, how much income would leave America?
Oh, you're talking about the earlier. Oh yeah, we have. The
tree said 4%.
No, I think she's. Let's get it clear.
4.
She said 4. You said 5. And how much is that?
That number is 8 trillion, like 8.3 trillion is household income that African Americans hold. A lot of that is value comes in our homes. Like when it comes to the different groups, most of our money is in our homes. Other groups have their money invested in the stock market and other things, but that number comes out. The reason we even had the 60% increase that I talked about earlier was because of what happened with home values. Unfortunately, during the period where all those corporate companies bought up all of the housing, and so housing prices went up. So we're benefiting because that's how we went up 60% in household wealth assets as a collective, because a lot of our money was in our homes and prices on homes went up so much. So we ended up reaping the benefit and moving from 2% to 5% of the collective household wealth assets. Household income, household assets. Trying to say it exactly right. So I hope I'm clarifying what you're asking for, brother.
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out I know out of 40, we got 42 million roughly.
Yeah, 42 to 45.
So that trillion, how many trillion you said? You said about
8 point something trillion out of the 138 trillion that Americans have. That is the Americans' money, not the government's money.
Yeah, so we low.
Yeah, we're 5%. We're only 5%.
Yeah, we low.
Yeah,
definitely low.
But yeah, but it's not the low to neg. It's not to make us negative. It's just like for example, I'm part of the Atlanta Black Chamber of Commerce. I know you had your thing, and so on that dialogue, I'll hear people say they'll still say stuff like, "Yeah, we need to spend with our own," not realizing that very few black companies are set up and all the customers ain't black. We do spend with our own. Like we say stuff based on BS narratives. Like I got people in a business group saying we need to spend on our own. I'm like, well, show me the black company where all the customers damn near ain't black. like I'm saying, you said so the narrative is pushing our conversation. The narrative is false. We do spend with ourselves.
What about we don't spend money? The money don't stay in our community. That's another false narrative.
Yes.
Could you explain that again? Hit that again. You said it earlier.
Yeah, it's a complete false narrative. Well, the reason it's a false narrative is because the concept itself is false. It's not even worthy to even argue. Should you circulate a dollar? It's a terrible economic. It's not even economically possible. So
you can't track who spends what.
Yeah, it can't. One, it can't be tracked. Yeah, it can't be tracked. So to get into the merits of something that is not even
trackable,
right? It's kind of a waste of time. But I will simplify it for those who still believe it's something that is effective. Because people, I've been in this, they think it's effective. At the end of the day, for the people that we admire, most of America admires the Jewish community because they did create banking the way we know it today. It is used worldwide. But I will promise you, if you actually go study the history of various, because Jewish groups have sects too, and they have different diversity inside of their groups too. And so what they did prior to creating banking is they would master an industry, and because they were often displaced before quote unquote Israel is built, because they were often displaced around the world, they mastered an industry, went to a place and sold their industry to others and brought that money back. And then when you bring it back and build up your community, then naturally as you build up your community, you circulate your dollar. But the circulating the dollar was not how the community was built up. They took their skill set, sold it to other groups, brought the money back. And since I live here, it's just like you have a nice home. You're gonna put shit on your home to make it look good.
Yeah.
And when your whole community starts doing that, and now your neighbor has a store down the street, you go to that neighbor. But going to that neighbor down the street is not how the community was built up. It was the outside dollars that built the community up. It's natural to go down the street to your neighbor who happens to be Jewish too. Like that's human nature. Like we have a concept of circling the dollar to an extent. We would want people, like we live in Atlanta, so we got it made. I buy black all the time. But if I go back to my hometown in Honeypad, I can go to some black restaurants, but I'm not finna be able to go to all the different stores that go to Atlanta.
Unless
I drive an hour away. Humans don't do that.
They don't do that.
Yeah, we have a concept that these other cultures do that. No, if you build up your neighborhood, you go to the stores in your neighborhood. That's what all humans do.
Yeah, gotcha.
All right, let me play these last couple of cuts, man, and get y'all out of here. Thank y'all for the extra time today.
We're like used to talking about, we know that like black people are better at sports, or black people are better at basketball and football. It's kind of a joke, but I would say that it's not that simple. We're excellent at everything. Basketball is just the only thing they couldn't stop us from doing by keeping us out of schools, keeping us out of neighborhoods, keeping us out of hospitals. They couldn't legislate it away from us. You can take a ball and hoop anywhere. You can express yourself and sing a song anywhere. That's why we dominate the arts, because they couldn't police the arts and keep us away from it. We get one generation of access, and we're the CEO of Amex, or we're running a country. Nobody played tennis. And then two girls from Compton decided to play tennis, and they're the best that have ever touched a racket. Nobody play golf. Black people don't play no golf. And then one guy was like, let me try this. Best that has ever touched on the planet. So it's just access.
It's just access. I love that comment from Jesse Williams. We are quite capable. I made this comment. I thought I had it on my phone. I don't see my phone, so let me pull it up real quick. This is a comment I just put on my IG. Let me pull it up real quick, and I would love to hear both of your thoughts because I think it's absolutely related to that what we just saw.
Yeah, if we got access, of course. I mean, you do what you have access to do. Yeah,
that's what humans do. It's absolutely
that's what humans do. It's human behavior to excel.
So here's a comment that I wrote, and I'll get both of y'all response. It says, Black consciousness is not relearning how great we were, but instead ridding our minds of the lies told to us about us. Black consciousness is recalibrating with the truth that we as Black people are not special, but more importantly, there is nothing wrong with us. The latter properly esteems the Black mind and is all we need to become great, even beyond Blackness itself. Just my 3 cents. Your thoughts, Latrice?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that? My dog was bothering me.
I could answer it.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm not looking at you. Yep. Go ahead.
Okay, so what you talking about as far as consciousness ain't what the general public or general African American community think consciousness is. Right. So I agree with your definition of it. I always felt like it was important for us to be aware of who we are in this world and understand what our worldview should be and how our worldview was changed through colonialism and to peek on the other side of the curtain to figure out what was our worldview. Now that we're in America, what worldview should we have? Your worldview should benefit you in getting food, clothing, and shelter and protection of that. If your worldview ain't that, you will get other people food, clothing, and shelter and protect theirs. And so it's important that you be conscious, is to be aware what the hell is going on around you. Simple as that, with no cut cards.
And there's nothing inherently wrong with us. So I would challenge when you consistently talk down on your culture.
It's crazy.
That was handed to you because of the narratives.
Like the Africans enslaved Africans.
Yep.
That's a wild statement.
Yep, here it is. We're not special, but ain't shit wrong with us.
No, yeah. We humans.
We're not special. Here's the last thing, and we out of here, y'all. Thank y'all for the extra time.
You didn't get a chance to respond to that.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Latrice.
No, you were supposed to read it because I was trying to get my dog some snacks.
That's all good. Did you want to respond, or you good?
No, I needed you to repeat it because I was giving him some
Okay, yeah. All right, I'll say real. But, yeah, let me do it. Let me just go. Let's go ahead and just close it out. Yeah,
okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're fine. You're fine. Yeah, no, that's all good. I was reading it on another screen, so I couldn't even see that you were
okay, yeah.
That's why I was saying that without even looking at you. But I just wanted to play this last cut. It's not even related to can Black people pull themselves up by that bootstrap, but I just want to highlight the strategy of our civil rights leaders that we hold in such high esteem. My superhero is Malcolm X, and so this is a dialogue of Andrew Young talking about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and I would ask that we learn to lean on the strategy for what we need today. What I would offer what has been done politically and collectively, often as African Americans, we are relying on strategies of yesteryear that are not as effective for what we need to do today. Like when Dr. Martin Luther King and them boycotted, they boycotted specific industries. They rarely boycotted nationwide. So symbolic boycotts are not the same strategies, or are they necessary once you've been integrated? That's a whole nother show for another day, but we have to come up with effective strategies versus downgrading and denigrating ourselves from false narratives, understanding that once we get access, just like Jesse Williams said, we do our damn thing. That's what all groups do. They do what's available to them. We do that, and we do it well as well.
Was the real issue between Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X?
There was no issue. The difference was that Martin Luther King learned in college, Malcolm X learned in jail. But Malcolm X read the dictionary and the Bible. See, and when Martin came back with the Nobel Prize, we were up there in Harlem in the Armory.
Mm-hmm.
And when we came in the back door, who was standing back there in the back door with Malcolm X? Two people, Malcolm X and Nelson Rockefeller.
Mm.
And Malcolm X said, I just wanted to thank you for all that you've done, and I want you to know that I am with you in anything you want me to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it's probably a better strategy if you and I don't seem to be so close.
Mm-hmm.
And said, that's why I'm not going to come in there with you in public. Well, I met Malcolm when I was here, and Mike Wallace did the story on Malcolm on 60 Minutes. And the black guy who was working with Mike Wallace was married to one of my secretaries at the National Council of Churches.
Mm-hmm.
And they invited me and my wife over to dinner. This was before Malcolm X was even known around, but we'd had dinner a couple of times together. Anytime he came to Atlanta, he came by our office, but Martin was never there.
Mm-hmm.
But he went to Selma to see Martin, and Martin got arrested that day and was in jail. So he spent the day with Coretta and me, and spoke at the mass meeting that night, and then went on his way.
Come on, Malcolm.
Malcolm.
Has they haven't met?
They met several times,
Because it's always
but it was always in private.
Publicly. Malcolm was playing his lane, he was playing his role publicly, but privately, he respected Dr. King. By the way, the Black Power movement came out of standing right next to Dr. King, walking in the South. The Black Power movement, that's where it started. They used Martin's visibility to get visibility for what they were doing, which was easier because people were angry, Black Power, getting angry. So, and Martin allowed all of that. He allowed everything to flourish around him. He wasn't insecure, but it wasn't his way.
I just thought it was a great way to conclude this overall conversation. Again, can we pull ourselves up by our bootstraps? We need to be aware of what it takes to get boots. And I started off, if you're just not tuned in late, I said from the beginning, I'm not romanticizing this collective, all Black people need to be together again. Like all Black people have to come together. I'm not romanticizing a mythological view of it. Collectively, what it typically looks like is groups that we admire outside of ourselves. And the only reason we're admiring them is because we're not in those groups to see their dirt. So it's natural. Like other groups give us props for how we move collectively because they're not inside of our group to see our dirt. But I'm saying that specifically for this reason. You do have to get collective with enough people who understand to govern yourselves. And so be involved from an economic and a politically standpoint, start economic things that are actually sound economically, not circulating the dollar stuff that is not actual something you can use. You have to be sound politically on a local level so that you can fight back. Mayor Andrew Dickens just 3 months ago talked about how they meet every other day to maintain the Black contractors they have in the city for the city based on what this administration is doing due to executive order. I'm not even taking a shot at Trump with that. I'm talking about how politics play out locally for real and understanding that. And when you understand on that level, you can make sound decisions to find a boot to pull yourself up with. That's what I'll leave us with. I'll get a comment from you, Brother Aunt, and Latrice, you close us out.
That last clip you played, I don't actually agree with a lot of that.
Okay.
I think Malcolm and Martin were diabolically opposed to each other. And I think that was, let me just make the point. I think that was important for us to see, to figure out which strategy was which. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Malcolm was in the Nation of Islam. Am I correct?
Yes.
And at no point did the Nation of Islam want to be anywhere around white people. They wanted their own thing. That's why they say the Nation of Islam. They wanted their own nation, We don't want your help. We don't like the civil rights. They was opposed to civil rights. They was opposed to they never wanted to integrate with white people. Am I correct? They wasn't integrationists. Am I correct? The whole organization was based off of no integration, none of that. So I'm saying that their theology, should I say, was diabolically opposed to each other. Now in real life they might have been friends but I'm saying just their actions. And so I think for me, it was important for me to see those two brothers fight the way they fight, and then we could see which way made more sense. So we ain't got to try to remake it again. So we kind of understand that there has never been a nation in history that was all stuck by itself, right? We understand that diversity always helps the case. So if you learn from other people, that's okay. Once you try to put yourself in a box and be a separatist, that's when you lose. So I think the strategy was far more better than putting ourselves in a box. We don't need no help from nobody. I think Martin's strategy was part excellent. We talk about it all the time.
Now, I would tell you that, this is Andrew Young himself. You got to remember, for 12 years, Malcolm X was a stout believer of everything he said, every word. He dog out Martin during that years, but he matured and kind of had his own way of thinking, and he came over to the things that you just heard Andrew Young talk about. I've read 12 books on Malcolm, and I know some of that story. Just obviously, I could only go by what I read, but when I saw Andrew Young talk about it from a personal standpoint, it was the stuff that I had read. But again, we're talking about a different period in Malcolm's life than the early 12 years when he didn't have nothing and disagree with everything that Martin did. So there was a period where he did do what you're talking about, but in his later years, he matured.
I'm talking about the nation period. As long as he was,
I'm just highlighting. You said he was talking about Malcolm Martin. Though I just want to get that clarification on here.
The organizations they represented. I'm talking about the organizations they represented.
Yeah, but you got. I'm just saying. But as Young was talking about, you said you disagree with it. That was
you can't separate the man from his organization that gives him the power.
You absolutely can when you realize he wasn't rocking with him at the point that Andrew Young is talking about. You can't do that. All right, go ahead, Latrice.
I think it's important to understand that Black folks have actually been bootstrapping all along, and that we've been doing it inside of the constraints that the oppressive nature of this country has built for us. We engage in radical self-reliance. We help each other when in times of need. We got hustle culture on lock. We definitely have creative problem solving. We are excellent at that. We've had to become that. We've always been bootstrapping. The trip part of it is that we're often bootstrapping while we're simultaneously carrying family issues and hardships, working within our community, and trying to overcome the institutional gaps that policy has created for us. We've rarely had access to equal capital that actually multiply the effort. Instead, we have lack. We don't have the same access, and instead we wind up being exhausted because of it. But don't get it twisted. We have always been pulling ourselves up by that proverbial bootstrap, even though realistically it's impossible to do. So we've been doing what's impossible.
Good stuff. Brother Pianki, I see you. I'm going to just say something about your last comment. I think you're overlooking the cut that I played by Jesse Williams. It says, Black families don't balance sports with academics. How many Black children had to be exploited to produce one LeBron James? While I understand what you're saying, I agree with Jesse Williams. The balance comes from what you have access to. Just like Jesse Williams was saying in that cut, he was saying, hey, whatever we've had access to, whatever we couldn't be denied, we excelled in. Humans do what's available to them. That's a reality. That's not an indictment when all humans do that. The reason we're having this immigrant issue as far as what the immigrants do for us, they're filling the jobs that are available to them based on the marketplace. And there was a time when we didn't have access to the jobs we have access to, and we filled those same positions. That is a human condition. That is not an indictment on the individual group. And I would challenge you, Brother Pianki, to not see it as an indictment on Black people for doing what's available to them. You, I, Brother Uncle Latrice, we all encourage our community to get involved in these other areas. That is a push, because those things were denied and not available. And now that they are more available, we are pushing more of our kids to do it. But people still do what's easily available and what they see. They see the athletes on the TV. It's accessible and they do it. That's human nature. That is not a black thing. All right, y'all, we out of here. Thank y'all for y'all time. I do want to highlight for anybody out there watching, the basic foundation for every solution that we're talking about is between the relationship between the black man and the black woman. So we have a new Black Love Dialogue that we're offering tomorrow. I'm going to play the commercial to end this show with that, and go to mentaldialogue.com, or even better, if you want to join us tomorrow night for our private podcast experience, the Black Love Dialogue and Wine private podcast experience. Go to blacklovedialogue.eventbrite.com and join us online. I'm going to close us out with that video. Thank y'all for y'all time today. Hopefully we'll see some of y'all online tomorrow for our private Black Love Dialogue and Wine session. What if the real problem with modern dating isn't a lack of love, but a loss of order? Welcome to Black Love Dialogue and Wine, a private podcast experience for those serious about love, marriage, and legacy. This isn't surface level romance. These are intentional conversations reclaiming the strongest love ever known, Black love. In today's dating culture, we've normalized trauma bonding and calling it commitment. We've romanticized love while forgetting marriage was built for legacy before feelings. At Black Love Dialogue, we restore balance, honoring love and structure, emotion and purpose. If you're seeking love, strengthening it, or preparing for marriage, this private experience gives you the mindset and resources to build lasting pair bonds. This private Zoom takes place 8 p.m. Eastern, last Sundays of the month. So get your tickets on eventbrite.com and bring your flash so we can toast and deep dive into legacy before love, featuring therapists Makaya Dominguez, Marilyn Odwini, mental health advocate Chris James, and award-winning relationship coaches Fala Antoine, Derek Cecile Clark, and Vaughn the Love Alchemist with over 35 years of marriage.